Being able to read fluently changes one's entire life. If one is not a proficient reader, school life becomes a struggle. One's confidence erodes. Analytical skills don't develop, one has a weak vocabulary. If the brain isn't positively stimulated with the skills needed for reading, one is likely to have negative interactions with the law, reduced economic power, less likely to pursue advanced educational goals, has a reduced desire to compete, and one loses the belief in equality and feels less than those who have been given greater educational advantages. In other words, without being able to read proficiently, the incredible spectrum of opportunities that life offers becomes so very narrow. If reading changes all the negatives above into positives, then the most important function of education, the number one job of an educational system, is to put in place whatever it takes to create highly proficient readers. The human intellect resembles the classic bell curve. So doesn't it make sense that the reading bell curve should be exactly the same? Of course it does. And yet, 93 million Americans have low literacy skills that leave many of them unable to make a good living or a high percentage serving prison time, thus costing Americans $200 billion a year. Low literacy is normal, right? Wrong. Those who can make you believe absurdities can make you commit atrocities. Those in leadership positions tell teachers to get students reading and then use a curriculum that does not contain the essentials to guarantee success for all students. Failure is blamed on poor teaching or neglectful parents instead of where it belongs. A curriculum that does not guarantee success. Sue Buckner never blamed students or parents in her schools. Using a great curriculum with high expectations meant that over 90% of her third-grade students read fluently. As a teacher, because I worked in an institution that treated low scores as normal, I believed that the low reading scores were simply expected. Until one year, I visited a school where there was absolutely no excuse accepted for low reading scores. And as a result, that school was top-ranked. That school got every child in kindergarten to become a fluent reader and writer. When those children reached third grade, this school with the highly effective reading programs soared past almost 1,000 schools to become the only high-poverty school in the state of Florida to be ranked in the top 100 schools. The first school I visited was Inwood Elementary, 2000, and later went to see another high-poverty, high-performing school, Sandhill Elementary, 2010. Both schools had Sue Buckner as principal. Both schools were demographically challenged and bottom-ranked. With Sue Buckner, both climbed to be top-ranked and academically competitive. Sue Buckner and these educational successes are the best-kept secrets in Florida. Sue Buckner demonstrated that with the right curriculum and high expectations, minority and educationally disadvantaged students could compete with any student at any school. Do we live in a country that welcomes equality, or do we live in a country that will do anything and say anything to keep the truth that Sue Buckner demonstrated from becoming widespread? Do we put the ladder of a child's future up against Sue Buckner's way of educating, or those with special interests or political agendas? Aiming for educational best practices, I wanted my students to get the same advantages as those at Inwood and Sandhill. So I made school board presentations about raising kindergarten benchmarks. After all, if the current curriculum is geared to be called highly effective when it only asks for students to read at about the 40th percentile, at a failing level, are we really doing what's best for students? When an educational culture calls failure excellence, can one ever become educationally competitive? So what's the magic that gets all of Sue Buckner's students from economically deprived and impoverished homes, reading proficiently? Here's the best part. Getting students to succeed is both cheap and pretty effortless. A successful reading curriculum contains 4 things in kindergarten: letter sound fluency, master of 44 letter sounds, and the ability to identify 70 sounds in 1 minute. Phonemic awareness, rapid responses to the major 8 areas of phonemic awareness. Sight word mastery, ability to recognize the 100 most often used words in reading and writing sentences. The ability to write 9 sentences independently. Putting the above in kinder curriculum is cheap, reasonably effortless, and creates the magic of having a child become a fluent reader, thus becoming a more successful student. If this is so easy, why do schools make it sound so difficult and impossible to achieve? Keep asking that question, because only when we, the taxpayers, understand that educational excellence is not only possible, but also pretty effortless to achieve, will schools be transformed. If you ask folks to put in place the following, watch to see if there is resistance to the idea, or for it to be poorly implemented. As a teacher, providing that these protocols are stunningly successful with very high scores, I've been involuntarily moved twice from teaching kindergarten students and moved to teaching 5th grade reading and math, had papers stolen from my desk and briefcase, lunches tampered with, and endless misinformation that made a challenging job difficult. www.kinderreading.org is dedicated to shining a light on Sue Buckner's truth and moving our schools to giving our absolute best to students so that they can have a bright future. If your school system has around 90% of its students reading proficiently, then your school system is doing a great job. If your school system falls short of having most students being successful, then check the curriculum to see if it contains all the necessary ingredients for success. Unfortunately, endless remediation is very profitable, and some folks get lost thinking that making money is more valuable than creating students that can compete with students in other countries. Statistically, there are too many countries that are doing a better job in educating and valuing their children. Our silence means that we agree with our schools not competing favourably with those in other countries. We can do better. For the sake of our children, we must do better. At www.kinderreading.org, you will find just what you need to create successful readers that will academically soar. Everything is free to make our students able to compete with any student in public or private schools anywhere in the world.